Thank you. This is Tiffany Morgan. Thank you guys again for having us. We're going to go ahead and get started while we do some introductions by starting with a poll, actually. And so if you would go to slido.com on your mobile device, on your laptop, whatever works best for you. And when you get to Slido, SLIDO.com, you can enter the hashtag. There'll be a place where you can enter hashtag and you can enter NAGT. And there's only one question for this poll. It's what are you most interested in learning about during today's session? So while we do that, we'll do some quick introductions. I'm Tiffany Morgan, Instructional Media Coordinator here at Iowa PBS. The rest of the PBS crew, do you want to introduce yourselves real quick?
Sure. Hi, this is Beth Daniels. Let me start my video so you can at least see me. Hi, everybody. Beth Daniels here. I'm from Twin Cities PBS in Minneapolis-St. Paul, Minnesota.
Great. Susie?
Hi, everyone. I'm Susie Hicks. I'm the Early Learning Content Specialist at Pbs Socal.
Fantastic. And Nancy?
Hello, everybody. My name is Nancy Coddington. I am the Director of Science Content at WSKG Public Media, and we are located in upstate New York.
So we're really excited to be with you all here today. And it looks like what you're excited to learn about from us the most is a toolkit of strategies, followed by some resources and a way to connect with PBS stations. And the exciting news is that you are going to find out ways that you can do all three during this webinar. So with that in mind, I am going to switch back here and go back to presenting our Google slide here. And our first presenter is going to be Susie with Pbs Socal. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Susie.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here. We are so glad to be collaborating on this webinar. So my topic specifically is science inquiry and ocean exploration with Pbs Socal. So you can go to the next slide. We are the PBS station for Southern California. So there are PBS stations all over the country, and we are the one that services areas like Los Angeles, Orange County, Riverside County, Ventura County. Right about a year ago, exactly, we created the at-home learning program, which allows students to access high-quality educational content on their TV, on the internet, and offline to make at-home learning a little bit easier as we transitioned into distance learning. You can go to the next slide. So the thing that I'm so excited to talk about today with you is the science inquiry process. And so this is a diagram to show what it means to do science inquiry. And so this is all about the curiosity that we want to foster that naturally occurs in early learners. And so what we do in the science inquiry process is we investigate, we ask questions and share ideas, we draw conclusions, and we observe and be curious. And so when we go a little bit closer into the science inquiry process, you see that we start out by asking new questions and we say, I wonder what that is. I wonder why something like that happens, which is a phenomenal way for us to describe natural phenomena that happens in our neighborhoods. The next thing is to predict and plan. And so predicting is coming up with an idea of what you think something's going to be like. And then once we have our predictions, we move forward and we investigate and we observe closely the things that we want to learn about. Once we have collected all of our observations, we collect, document, and represent our data through either spoken word, drawings, diagrams, charts, and then we look at patterns and relationships between the things, and we start to analyze the data. And then it's a circle, so it leads us to even more questions that we have from there. And then we look at this whole process as an overarching theme of curiosity and collaboration. So we see in the little pink circle right there, our sweet little PBS Kids characters are wondering about how a caterpillar turns into a butterfly. And so they're asking questions and saying, it's different than a bee, it's different than something else. Oh, we see that the caterpillar bites the leaf, puts a cocoon on a stick, and then turns into a butterfly. So this is great. This is great about learning for STEM reasons, but it's also a phenomenal part of social emotional development, because social emotional development has the ways that we view ourselves, the world, and each other. And so when we do science inquiry, we're helping ourselves make predictions and create experiments and foster a relationship with learning, while also fostering a relationship with the other people that we're doing the collaboration with. So science is never siloed. Science always has to do with our personhood, our relationships, our expectations of the world, and the ways in which we can navigate it. You can go to the next slide. So we want to talk about how science inquiry can also foster a sense of play, and why play is so important for early learners, especially when they're getting into STEM. Because sometimes there is an expectation of science that has to be all serious, and that it has to only take place in a lab with people wearing lab coats who have 8 PhDs. But that's not true. And the beauty of all of this STEM learning is that it turns into play. And so the core tenets of play are, number one, taking risks, making mistakes in a safe space, exploring new ideas, and something that we often forget when it's formalized is experiencing joy. And so play, as Mr. Rogers says, is really the work of childhood, because it allows them to have a safe space in which they can explore and discover new things about their worlds while feeling like they are experiencing a lot of fun. So in STEM, when we go into careers as scientists, when we go into careers in geoscience and in conservation biology, physics, space science, we always are taking risk, because we are learning how to make discoveries. So we're taking risks, and obviously we don't always get it on the first try. So we want to have that safe space to make mistakes and explore new ideas, because scientific discovery happens when we think outside of the box. And if all of us in our science careers have felt anything, it's joy once you get it right. So we always want to focus on the love of play in everything that we do. You can go to the next slide. So to talk about Mr. Rogers, who is a big proponent of all of the content we do at PBS, these are really important things for a child to develop in a classroom if they're going to be learning any subject. So the first one is a sense of self-worth, a sense of belonging and understanding that they are a really important part of the classroom. The next one is a sense of trust. A major question that students ask of their teachers are, do you like me? And we want to make sure that they feel safe in the classroom that we have in. The third one to go into our science inquiry is curiosity, of saying, I wonder, I want to learn more about that thing. Then there's the capacity to look and listen carefully and have that kind of critical thinking of all of the content that you're consuming and how you can make relationships and build models around the things you're discovering. The next one is capacity to play, which we talked about just now. And the last one is times of solitude, and understanding that times of solitude can actually foster a lot of academic growth and a lot of really exciting discoveries. And that solitude and isolation are two separate things. And that these are things that we can foster in terms of a love of learning. You can go to the next slide. So the ways that we can bring all of these things together are in citizen science. I am a huge lover of citizen science because it allows people that are just everyday citizens like you and me, and students and people who are just interested, to participate in formalized science processes. So it allows them to look at natural phenomenon in their areas. It allows them to be a geoscientist in their very own neighborhoods. And it allows them to feel like they're a part of something as well. So it talks about that, the low stakes of playing while also becoming a part of the scientific community as a whole. And so citizen science is everywhere. Citizen science is all over the globe, but the beauty of it is that it's localized. So you can find a citizen science program wherever you are. And if you go to the next slide, we can talk about the specific citizen science that takes place in Los Angeles. So I am broadcasting to you from Los Angeles. It's very fun. We have some wonderful ecosystems in Los Angeles. We have the beach, we have the mountains, we have forests, we have the desert, all within a 2-hour drive. So it's a really awesome way for us to find how we can integrate ourselves into the local community by looking at the ecosystems that are around us. And the Los Angeles Public Library has a citizen science program that we actually are talking about later today that talks about these things. If you want to move forward, I can go to the next slide. So the local inquiry partners we have are the California Academy of Sciences, the Los Angeles Public Library, and the City of STEM. So the City of STEM is a science festival that talks about all of the amazing things that happen in Los Angeles. So these are all of the places that you can go, even if you're not in Los Angeles, to do local science inquiry. And then if you go to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about PBS specific resources. So we in Los Angeles are still doing distance learning. So we have a lot of at-home activities that can foster a love of play, a love of citizen science. And the first one is our Pbs Kids Digital Box, which is actually included in the resources from this webinar. So if you get a follow-up from this webinar, you will actually be able to access a Pbs Kids Digital Box, which is a PDF collection of a bunch of science inquiry experiments and fun things that you can do at home. And then once we send this out, there are some videos you can watch about the motion of the ocean, ocean life, and I Am Ocean that helps us talk about what it means to be underwater and how the ocean works. And then you can do some offline activities that don't even have to do with any devices. So you can share this with families that may not have a lot of Wi-Fi or internet access. We have the digital backpack. We have a marine word search to talk about vocabulary around the ocean. And we have marine bingo that you can take to the beach, or you could do from home and talk about your knowledge of the ocean. So those are all of the things that I've got to share with you, but I'm so excited to see all of the things that everyone else has to say. And thank you so much for having me here.
Thanks very much, Susie. I'm going to take over now. Beth Daniels here. I'm going to talk about Hero Elementary, our comprehensive approach to equity, and how our equity focus informs our pedagogy and also the superpowers of science. Next slide, please. First, I'm going to start out with just a little background, moving on. Next slide. Hero Elementary is a ready-to-learn project. It's developed by Twin Cities PBS. But it's for everybody. It's national, it's on Pbs Kids, everybody can access it. The Federal Department of Education, back up please, sorry. The Federal Department of Education funds these ready-to-learn initiatives to support young children's academic readiness. And you can see here a couple of the various ready-to-learn properties that have been created over the years. Next slide. So what we do here at Hero Elementary is we have created what we call playlists. A playlist is a collection of content that is designed to inspire, empower, and deepen children's science learning. And every playlist has an 11-minute digital episode, TV episode in it, a digital game or an analog game, informational e-articles about grade level science topics, 2 hands-on activities that are usually exploratory or investigative in nature, and a couple of Science Power notebook pages. Now, the Science Power notebook is a digital science learning tool where children can work out their understanding much the way a scientist would use their own notebook. Next slide. Children can encounter Hero Elementary in school, in after-school programs, in summer programs, and at home. They learn in person, they learn via distance learning. Here in the Twin Cities, we just recently left distance learning, I think, for most kids. Some are still doing distance, but nationwide, of course, it's a grab bag everywhere. They can also learn online in various ways, whether they're doing distance learning or not. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about equity-focused science learning because that approach underlies everything we do. Next slide. We created this transformative transmedia framework for early STEM learners, working with Dr. Ronnie Ellington out of Morgan State University. The 5 guiding principles of our framework are right here for you to see, and also in our lovely tree diagram. And this framework is actually for our writers and for our content developers. This is how we ensure that everything we create really does honor, welcome, and celebrate children from communities that have been marginalized and excluded from access to STEM opportunities. Next slide. In addition to making our content equity focused, we also wanted to support educators to work effectively with children from marginalized communities. And we found this wonderful book, NGSS for All Students. It's based on Appendix D of the NGSS. And it really focuses on research-based practices for what teachers can actually do. It's very practical in approach. Next slide. This table is from Chapter 5 of NGSS for all students, and I love this table with all my heart because it shows in very simple form what you can do to support kids who have been denied equal access. When I saw this, my heart just pitter-patted. Next slide, please. With permission from NSTA, who are the publishers of the book, and the book's editors, we adapted 6 of their strategies to use with our educators. The first one is connecting science to children's sense of place in their own community. Moving on, next slide. Valuing the community's knowledge and experiences through culturally relevant pedagogy. Next slide. Engaging in real-world hands-on learning. Next. Offering multimodal experiences and multiple ways to represent and access information. Next slide. Emphasizing the importance of discussion and reflection as part of that scientific process. Next slide. And finally, developing strong, meaningful, and respectful home and community partnerships. Next slide. We've been doing program evaluation as we go along, and our evaluations have shown that educators appreciate the training in the equity strategies and that they're using the strategies. And the quote here from the Hero Elementary educator really gives a good sense of, how valuable this equity-focused approach to science has been and how beneficial it is for the kids involved. Next slide. So I mentioned the superpowers of science earlier. This is one of our favorite tools for engaging and empowering children in science learning. Next slide, we'll dig in and find out what that's all about. Okay, Hero Elementary was tasked from the start with integrating science and literacy. And we found that the superpowers of science could integrate science and literacy right through the NGSS science and engineering practices, which is also a focal point in our guiding principles for the transformative transmedia equity framework. Every single science and engineering practice relates to communicating, and that connects directly to literacy and English language arts. Next slide. So with Sparks Crew to the Rescue, if you've ever watched the show, that's a tag phrase that we use all the time. With Sparks Crew to the Rescue, those superpowers of science were born. Next slide. These superpowers of science really anchor our pedagogy with this idea of we do science using the superpowers of science, using those processes and practices to understand the big ideas of the world around us. Next slide. We put that soul of the science and engineering practices into child-friendly language, and we use it everywhere. We use it in every episode of Hero Elementary. Next slide. Every online game. Back up. Anyway, every online game, every hands-on activity, and next slide, in songs. So this is a How to Hero song, one sec, and it shows children using the superpowers of science. So let's take a look at Investigate.
Time to learn how to hero. Hey you, yes, that means you. Let's go hero, using your superpowers of science. Today's superpower is
the power to investigate.
When you're a hero, look inside yourself. When people are in need and want lots of help, you must figure out what to do. People look for heroes, heroes just like you. Heroes don't sit and wait. Ooh. Heroes investigate. Investigate, investigate. Every hero knows. Investigate, investigate. Es muy fantástica. Others just might walk on by without ever wondering what if or what. But heroes like you can't ignore the power
So there you have it. Heroes investigate. Move on to the next slide. I'd like to just give you a little example of how all of these, the superpowers of science, the equity strategies, and our overall transformative transmedia framework play out in an actual playlist. For example, the Land and Water playlist. Move ahead to the next slide. The core questions for the Land and Water playlist focus on kinds of landforms and bodies of water in the world and in children's local environment. How are these landforms and bodies of water alike? How are they different? How can we model landforms to learn about their similarities and differences? And the playlist activities shown here on the right-hand side reflect those questions and related superpowers of science. Let's take a look. Next slide. This is a piece from our co-viewing guide for the Back on Track episode. Our co-viewing guides help educators guide meaningful discussion of the science concepts and practices in the video. For a Back on Track video, you can see here the superpowers of science highlighted. Next slide. And here in the discussion notes about specific clips in the video, we've also highlighted those superpowers of science. What are the children doing? How are they making sense of the information? How do they share their information? Next slide. This is a page from our Science Power Notebook. The Science Power Notebook, again, supports equity strategies and superpowers of science, such as reflection, making sense of information, and using multiple modes of expression. Children can write, they can record their voices, they can use stickers to express themselves, they can draw, they can even take a photo and upload it into the Science Power Notebook. So they've got a lot of different ways to express what they're understanding about science as they go. Next slide. I mentioned before we have hands-on activities. This is a piece of a hands-on activity. The activities, of course, they're activity plans. They have step-by-step instructions for educators. And again, in the Doing Science section, we highlight those superpowers of science. Children are investigating, observing, comparing, sharing information as they create models of a lake, ocean, or river. Next slide. And here in the reflection portion of our hands-on activity, you can see those equity strategies focused on, again, local places and the idea of reflection itself. Next slide. Like everybody else, when COVID hit, we adapted our playlists for distance use with materials for educators to use online with kids and for families to use at home. In addition, we have developed videos of each of our hands-on activities so that if children aren't able to do them at home with our home versions, or if educators have a difficult time running the activity live at a distance, they can still show the activity and discuss it as they go with the students. Next slide. Hero Elementary content is available on PBS Learning Media. And for those of you who have maybe never visited pbslearningmedia.org, I highly recommend it because you can find all kinds of information there. Thus far, we offer content from 14 Hero Elementary playlists, and there's more to come. Thanks. Next slide.
All right. Thank you, Beth. This is Tiffany. I am going to walk you through some of the resources that we have for increasing equity and inquiry through local phenomena. And so we're going to start with, what is phenomena? And if we were face to face, I'd probably ask you, how familiar are you with the concept of phenomena? It can be, used synonymously with a lot of different things, but in the NGSS and in the science world, as many of you may know, but not all, phenomena are the things that happen in our natural world, things that happen around us that we need to use our science and engineering skills to explain. And phenomena really is one of the critical pieces of the NGSS. It's the part that personally I'm really excited about because it's the things that will spark wonder and curiosity. It's the things that you see around you that lead you to want to investigate and learn more. And the great thing about phenomena and NGSS implementation is not just that the phenomena be aligned to the standard. but that it be relevant, meaningful, and authentic to the student. That portion is not a nice to have. It's not a if you can make it happen. It really is a key component of all standards for all students, as the NGSS Appendix D that was just referenced was discussed. So just a few pieces here that talk about the importance of local phenomena and local science as it relates to students and why local matters. If you're not familiar with STEM teaching tools, I put the URL up there. It's a fantastic site. Each of the practice briefs are fantastic resources, just one sheets about each. So I just picked out a few that really focus on equity and the importance of local phenomena. And it really can be transformative when we can see that STEM and science and engineering happen everywhere. It doesn't just happen, probably for everywhere, but particularly in the Midwest. We see it happening in Los Angeles, or we see it happening on the East Coast, or in Florida, or in Canada. But science happens here. It can be meaningful, it can be local, and it can even be hyper local. So our response at Iowa, as we were developing resources to connect with Iowa teachers and Iowa students, was how can we make phenomena more meaningful to Iowa students? And so the resource that we developed is called the Iowa Science Phenomena Project. And so I'm going to show you just a very quick, I think I win the award for the shortest video clip in this presentation, just a very quick overview, and then we're going to dive in a little bit.
Iowa is filled with natural wonder. Engage your science students with phenomena captured by Iowa teachers and outdoor experts. Make science personal by connecting it to students' local environments. You can even capture and share your own phenomena. Explore the Iowa Science Phenomena website today.
Super fast, right? So that's a lot of information put into 20 seconds. So what does that really mean?
Iowa is filled with natural wonder. Engage.
There we go. So the URL for the site is on the bottom there, so you can explore it locally on your machine, either through this presentation or after there's time. But really, the key components about the Iowa Science Phenomena Project are this: that it is local, that it doesn't matter what part of Iowa you're from, and we're going to talk about what happens if you're saying, I'm not from Iowa. Can I still use this? Why would you tell me about this? It's still for you. Is that these are the things that are meaningful across Iowa to Iowa students and Iowa teachers. How do we know that? Because the media, the videos, the phenomena, the data sets, the photographs, everything that is in this site has either, for the majority, been captured by local teachers or has been aligned and vetted by Iowa teachers. So the goal of the Phenomena Project is that it is user generated. So we want teachers from all across the state to capture the things that are happening in their communities, in their neighborhood, that are exciting, that make curiosity, that make us want to ask questions. So if you're not from Iowa, each of the photographs that are represented here really represent every corner of Iowa. And so it may be things that you've never heard of, depending on where you're from, but you can still explore. The other thing that makes this site really unique is that we took our inspiration from this site from a lot of the similar projects that are out there. So Wonder of Science, the Georgia Teachers Phenomena Project, Michigan Go Open. All of those resources do a great job of showcasing phenomena that are important and meaningful to their regional areas. And we wanted to do something similar, focused on the things that are unique to Iowa. For each phenomena, you'll be able to sort and sift when you're on the website. You can sort and sift by grade, by DCI from the NGSS, by SEP, by cross-cutting concepts. So all of those superpowers you can sort and sift by there, and get something that matches up with what you're looking for as a teacher. And then once you select the phenomena, and so the liquid that was on the burning tree that you saw in that video, this is what you would see. You'd see all of the information provided by an Iowa teacher, including a description, a guiding and compelling question. So these are the types of things that you would hope your students would be asking, noticing, and wondering as they watch these videos. There are classroom suggestions. How could you use this in your classroom? Just a few ideas. There's not going to be lesson plans. It's not going to be curriculum resources, but it's going to be a few of those ideas that make you think, how could I use this with my teacher or with my students in my classroom? Along with some related resources. Maybe you want to dive a little bit deeper. Maybe you need some remediation. These are resources that the teachers have hand selected and said, these are things that I would use. And so this one is a second grade class submitted by Lisa Szynski. She said, these are things I would use in my class. These are the questions and the activities I hope students would be interested in my class. So to answer the question, I'm not in Iowa, why would I use this? What I tell teachers and I tell students is science happens in Iowa. And if you're in another state and you're doing a lesson on geology, there's no reason that you can't use Gitche Manitou State Park and look at how the glaciers that came into the Midwest are visualized on the surface level through that state park. There's no reason that you can't look at the life cycle of a prairie or the land use of a prairie versus a farm through Iowa. So it doesn't matter where you're at. All of these are going to be unique. And they also might spur some ideas of things that are similar in your area that you might not have thought of. We have a lot of abandoned mines in our area. And so we have a number of phenomena there that teachers have aligned. And you might think, I have that in my area too. So you can start to make those connections to the things that are relevant in your area, because when it's relevant and local, hyper local, that is when students are going to get excited. They're going to say, I can go there, I can see that, I can understand it in a way that makes sense in my world. And by doing that, it makes it more meaningful for those students. Okay, with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nancy.
Hi, thank you so much. This has been such a wealth of information already. I know I've learned some new things. Again, I'm Nancy Coddington. I am the Director of Science Content at WSKG Public Media, and I'm in Ithaca, New York, so up in upstate. And I'm going to talk to you today about some resources that we developed in partnership with the Museum of the Earth. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk about today something called the critical zone. And that's a pretty big word right there, critical, right? So what is so critical about this zone? Well, it's the Earth's outer skin. It's a thin layer that extends from the tops of the trees down into the subsurface to the base of groundwater. And it's the zone of transformation. So that whole section, you might not think that that's a thin layer, but when you take the Earth as a whole, it's not actually very, very big. But this is where water and atmospheric gases become plants. Rainfall becomes soil moisture for ground, and also groundwater and stream water. Rocks and vegetation are turning into soil. Stream water and groundwater acquire dissolved minerals and nurture the ecosystem. The shape of the landscape gradually changes as mountains form and then also erode. So all of these processes support human communities, and this layer is critical. Water and atmospheric gases move through this porous critical zone, which supports the life as we know it. That's important, obviously, to us, right? Next slide, please. So where are these critical zone observatories that we are talking about? There are 9 of them located across the United States. There are also some others in our other parts of the world, but the US National Critical Zone Observatory Program is, we have those 9, and it's located in different climatic and physiographic environments. And they start in California and range all the way to Puerto Rico. The Critical Zone Observatory is basically, it's an environmental laboratory. It's a platform for research that functions as a catchment for the watershed scale, and it's focused on the interconnected chemical, physical, and biological processes shaping Earth's surfaces. And each one of them is unique because of the bedrock on which it sets. And that is really where scientists want to delve in to try to figure out what's causing some of these things to be happening in each one of these unique locations. So the scientists that work in these observatories are working so in an interdisciplinary manner. You know, they are collaborating using data to get the big picture of what's happening at each site. You know, so instead of just being a biologist that comes in and looks specifically at a type of bug or to looking at a tree, you're actually looking at the entire process. So as that tree is pulling nutrients up, what kind of nutrients is it pulling up from the ground, and where is it getting those from? You know, how does that actually change in the leaf litter depending on the bedrock and or the chemistry of human impact of things that have happened? So this open sharing of data across the observatories allows scientists to really get a better understanding of how these processes work with humans and also without humans, which is going to help when predicting climate change and how we are changing the world around us. Next slide, please. So the critical zone observatories really look at all of this science from different angles, and they are able to work together with their different backgrounds on common problems to reach new solutions. You know, think about the analogy of when you're trying to, if you experience something new, you use your 5 senses to discover something, right? So if you have maybe a piece of food, you're going to smell it. And, you know, that would be the first thing. So you're not going to stop right at just smelling it because it looks amazing, right? We're using our eyes to observe it. Maybe we pick it up and we touch it and decide, you know, oh, the texture of this is really good. No, this is going to taste good, right? And then you're also going to go ahead and put that in your mouth. So really kind of using all of those senses is similar to what the scientists are doing to answer some of these questions. And it's kind of groundbreaking because a lot of scientists work in those silos, whereas in the observatories, it's really interdisciplinary and they have to work together in order to be able to solve all of these issues. Tiffany, can you go ahead and play this video? This is a video from the critical zone, and it gives a nice cross section of what happens at the observatory. And then I'm going to talk about some teacher materials that can go along with this.
Earth is in a constant state of transformation, from large-scale disasters, both natural and man-made, to the microscopic chemical processes that control decay and decomposition. It is becoming ever more evident that our ecosystem is under increasing pressure from global change, leaving many people wondering, how will our landscapes respond? Across the country, scientists believe that we can better understand how our Earth will respond to this global pressure by studying what they call the critical zone.
The critical zone is the part of the Earth's environment in which we as humans interact.
It's where rock meets life. It's the veneer of the continental land surface that extends from the top of vegetation and the canopy down through soil and bedrock to whatever depth fresh groundwater is circulating.
We call it the zone of transformation because that's where things happen. That's where atmospheric CO2 is turned into plant material. That's where plant material is turned back into atmospheric CO2. That's where water is transformed from rainwater into groundwater and stream water. All those processes take place in the critical zone. It's a very active and dynamic zone. It's the zone where really important things happen at the Earth's surface.
It provides the food that we eat. It filters and cleans the water that we drink and provides us the oxygen that we breathe. So it's imperative to understand the critical zone.
But I think even beyond that, it's critical also to all types of life. This is where most ecosystems live that are terrestrial, life on this planet.
Here in the U.S., a network of 9 critical zone observatories, or CZOs, provide scientists with an important window through which to make key observations about the structure and function of critical zone processes. Each observatory is located on a unique landscape, from the wooded hills of the Northeast to the deserts of the Southwest and the snow-covered Rocky Mountains. Each provides scientists with another piece of the puzzle to understanding the critical zone.
The advantage of having many different critical zone observatories gives us the opportunity to look at similar processes, be they physical or chemical or biological, in different systems. So ones that are sitting on different geologies, that have different tree species associated with them, have different ecosystems as a function of that, different climates.
The observatories represent really very small portions of the landscape. And so if we want the science that we're accomplishing here to be meaningful, we have to bring that science to be applicable to larger pieces of the landscape.
Well, what we're trying to do is really understand the critical zone as a thing, and we're trying to really look at it as if it's all one entity and understand all the different processes that are going on, whether it's biological, physical, geological, hydrological. And we get all sorts of people with all sorts of expertise that study different pieces of it.
Scientists at the various CZOs each bring their own unique backgrounds and skill sets to bear on common problems, working together to reach new solutions. It is work that by its very nature is interdisciplinary.
The beauty of critical zone science lies within its interdisciplinary nature. And so part of the motivation for critical zone science is in getting different disciplines talking and communicating with each other.
We often think of those sciences as being separate disciplines, and one of the things that's really nice about the critical zone observatories is it gives people that study those varying disciplines a seat at the same table, so we can talk about processes that interrelate that maybe we wouldn't have known about otherwise.
We need to bring a lot of different tools to bear to understand this critical zone because it's quite a complicated system. It's not one person doing one kind of thing. It's a group of people with different tools, different sets of knowledge, working on the same system that has a lot of different facets.
You know, sometimes I think about it like the fabrics in weaving. You know, if we can, you know, what we used to do is look at the threads separately, each of us, and then we try to weave it together, but we didn't know where it went at all. Well, now we've got the threads that we're looking at separately, but it's all in the same location. We can see how they all go back together. And so now we're starting to put it back together and come up with real deep understanding that we didn't have before.
Scientists who study the critical zone are trying to better understand this system with and without the pressures of human impact.
The biggest impact I think humans have on the critical zone is the fact that we are changing our climate so significantly. By introducing carbon into the atmosphere, which is increasing temperatures, we are changing the hydrologic cycle, and in that process we're changing all of the other cycles that hinge on water as a piece of it.
Well, it turns out that more and more humans are playing a huge part. You know, obviously we're changing things globally, we're changing the climate globally, which impacts the critical zone, but we are considered the biggest geologic force on the planet now, so erosion is faster today than it has been in the geologic past, and it's really because of humans.
We as humans can only understand how we negatively impact the critical zone and the way the various linked processes of chemistry, biology, geology, and the atmosphere interact with each other if we understand how they operate without us in nature.
We need to understand how we're changing the critical zone and what that means in terms of how it changes into the future. Because, you know, we're messing it up. You know, we're pulling the threads out and changing things, and, you know, we need to understand, you know, what's important about the changes that we're making.
Increasingly, our planet is being adversely affected by humanity. And so if we're going to be able to sustain our presence on the planet, we need to reduce our impacts on these natural processes that are here and allow us to thrive.
Next slide, please, Tiffany. So this video is a really nice way to introduce this concept and how scientists are working together to discover what's happening in these observatories. And then to build on that, we have some resources for you to use as well. So again, as I think as Susan Brantley really put it well, with having that weaving of those threads together to be able to understand it and understand that terrestrial life that lives on this. You know, how does the critical zone form? How does it function? And how will it change in the future? So with this lesson plan, this was created by Alex Moore from the Museum of the Earth in Ithaca, New York. And what it does is has your students using large data sets on water flowing through 3 different critical zone observatories, through the Eel River in California, Boulder, Colorado, and in the Calhoun, South Carolina Observatory. So they're comparing and contrasting that data flow, but there's also things to consider like elevation and the unique bedrocks that are part of those systems as well. So these resources, I'm going to go ahead and pop the links into the chat, but that is available for you. There's a teacher resource with a lot of great information, and then there's a student handout already for you to use in your classroom. And these are tied right to the next generation science standards. Tiffany, next slide, please. And so it fits right into your classroom in an easy way for you to be able to implement those in. So thank you very much.
Okay, and so with that, we're going to open it up for questions in the that may or may not be there. I've been able to look at chat, so we'll take a look at those. But also, we wanted to go back over and kind of have a closing activity in Slido. So again, just go to Slido, slido.com. If you have it up, the question will be there in just a second. That hashtag again is NAGT, and we're going to do what is one word to describe what you learned today. So let me exit out here, and we'll go to, there we go. So you should be able to enter a word into the cloud there. Hopefully you're seeing that. So as you do that, I will also take a look over here at any questions that we may have in the chat.
We have some questions collected in another document as well, Tiffany. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah. Missy, do you want to pop in? And I think you have organized a couple of them to ask.
Sure, certainly. Thank you so much to the presenters. And I love how diverse your topics were, and I'm sure everybody that's listening did as well, because we just learned so much from 4 different people, which was really awesome. Thanks again. So for a couple of our presenters, feel free to jump in, whomever would like. It seems that you're working with some important but intangible elements of learning, identity, and development. How do you assess for that impact? And what metrics do you use to know that your goals are being served?
That is a great question. I'll answer mine just really quick, and then open it back up to the rest of the group. So for the Iowa Science Phenomena Project, we were lucky enough to get a CPB grant, and within that 2-year grant that we're currently in year 2 of, we're going to be doing pilot testing. We're going to be working with a higher ed evaluative program to come in and make sure that we say we're doing what we're actually say we're doing. And so we're hopeful that next year we'll have some research on that, but we'll also be able to implement the lessons learned. We do lots of surveys. We work with lots of teachers who are on the ground. And so it ranges from nearly any project we do, from the very formal sort of research to the maybe more informal boots on the ground collecting voices. So that's us, but I'll let the others answer as well.
I can go next. So at Pbs Socal, we're lucky enough to have an evaluation specialist on our staff and on salary. So whenever we do something in the community, or we do a webinar or professional development, or if we go into the community and do a training or a workshop with parents and real students, we have her develop an evaluation plan. So that ranges from Zoom polls when we're virtual, to surveys after things that we do in the community, to interviews that she does with community members. So it's a lot of ask and you shall receive in terms of feedback, which has really informed our distance learning, and hopefully once we're back in person will inform a lot of the work we do in the community.
I can take the, sorry. For Hero Elementary, because we have that big federal Ready to Learn grant, research is a huge part of that. So we have been partnering with WestEd from the very beginning to do formative research on everything that we create. So we go out and we test it in the community. They do summative research for us. They're actually just beginning our second major study. It's a randomized control study of children actually using Hero Elementary materials in the field. And they have done a series of case studies and program evaluation related to our outreach program, where we have reached out nationwide to formal educators and informal after school and summer programs. We've trained them and they use our materials and they work with kids. So we're getting all manner of quantitative and qualitative feedback as to how things have gone with Hero Elementary, what's working, what isn't working. I wish I could speak more specifically to what some of the findings are coming out now. But just in general, the educators they're finding that students are extremely responsive because we've taken such a detailed approach with equity and diversity and inclusion. Nancy actually is one of our trainers, so she may have some additional things to say about it. But yeah, we've been doing a lot of work, and a lot of it has been qualitative research, quite frankly, to find out just what is grabbing children and their educators as far as how we integrate these ideas with them. But there's definitely a lot of a sense that children are saying, yes, science does mean something to me. I can use science in my community. And I am looking for the URL for the website where all this research will be, is being disseminated. So stay tuned for that.
And I just want to build on what all my colleagues are saying. We are very much forward facing, working with our educators, but also kind of take a step back and making sure that the science that we're putting out there is sound science, and that we are working with our scientists to be able to communicate that in a way that is effective and not just using jargon, but a way that excites our students. And I think just from the videos that you saw here today, I think that job has been done very well, and it's not an easy one to do. We also work with teachers in creating the content that goes out, so is vetted. I know that at WSKG we have a science advisory board, and I know with Hero Elementary there was all kinds of vetting of content, not only looking back with the scientists, but also working with educators to make sure that this is going to be a fit and filling a need and filling a gap in the classroom and in the after school space.
At this point, we're going to have to break away from the questions, even though we have a cadre of additional questions. We can't thank you enough and really appreciate the intentionality of your programs. And always, personally, I've always appreciated PBS and their intentionality. And so, Aida, did I give it back to you?
Thank you very much. So we have our post-webinar survey up there. And as Missy said, I want to thank our four presenters today. That was a wonderful and joyous webinar. So it was great to see everybody smiling and have the ability to just take a look at those wonderful activities. Post-webinar survey link is in the chat box in a couple of places there. So please do complete our post-webinar survey. It's really important to us that we have that feedback from everyone who participates in our webinar. One of the last questions on there is an opportunity for you to suggest other webinar topics, and we really do pay attention to those. So please do complete that. Next slide, please. Just a couple of things really quickly from each one of our sponsoring organizations here. First of all, from the National Association of Geoscience Teachers, NAGT. NAGT has a lot of wonderful member benefits, and I encourage you to drop into the NAGT website and explore those. But in particular, a complete webinar series with webinars about once a week, maybe even a little bit more frequently than that. And you can see some of the sponsoring projects there across the bottom of that slide. Next slide, please. Missy, you want to speak to NESTA?
Sure. NESTA, National Earth Science Teachers Association, is your national organization for Earth and Space Science teachers, K-12, as well as anybody who entertains those Earth and Space Science teachers. We are a member organization with journals, e-news, as well as representation at a number of conferences. Please join us.
Next slide, please. I think Ed is still here. Ed?
Yeah, I am. Thanks, everybody, and thanks to our presenters today. The American Geosciences Institute is a federation of professional societies. We sponsor many different programs for educators. I invite you to take a look at our website and see the different materials, the different resources that are available to you, everything from our Education Geosource database to our Science Week and much, much more. So please do visit. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Next slide, please. A reminder that our next upcoming webinar will be April 8th, and the title of that webinar is Social Media from the Chat Room to the Classroom. And please do watch your inbox. In the next couple of days, there will be a survey coming out. We'd love to include some of the feedback from you in the presentations that will be taking place and in the panel discussions during that webinar on the 8th. So thank you very much for that. And the last slide, I think, is coming up here. If you'd like to reach out to any of us with any comments or thoughts about the webinar series or our programming, our email addresses are up there. Once again, I would like to thank our CERC staff in the background. I know Sean dropped in. Thanks, Sean and Mitchell, for helping us out with the tech. And to our 4 presenters today, wonderful job on the webinar. I wish you all a great afternoon. Thanks for joining us today.